knows, because at the core, marketing strategies are typically the same with some variation based on B2B based on B2B versus B2C and the channels that they're on. But the strategies are the same. We're trying to resonate with what hits their target customer best.
This is the Money Seed Podcast, where we discuss all things investing, plain and simple, the way it should be. Please remember, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be investment advice. Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. Today, my guest is Caleb Roche. Caleb is the founder of Club Creative, and he is a marketing consultant. He works with small businesses and medium-sized businesses to promote their brands and products online. Caleb, welcome to the show.
Gabe, thanks for having me on. I'm very excited about this one.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. I think there are two things that really stand out in your story, and I want to get into both of them. One is the fact that you are a full-time entrepreneur in your mid-20s, which I think is fantastic. So I think we're going to start there, and then we'll get into the specific of what exactly a marketing consultant does and how you work with these businesses online. So let's get started, Caleb. You are 25 years old, I believe, give or take, and you are a full-time entrepreneur. How did you become a full-time entrepreneur? I mean, most people your age are either starting out on their first full-time job or are saving money for their first house, and yet you seem to be well on your way toward a successful career, et cetera, as your own boss. How did you do it?
I hope so. I hope it continues to be successful. So I have kind of a cool little story. I always like to tell people I'm not I wasn't the 5-year-old that was selling millions of dollars worth of products. I was no genius on the entrepreneur side, but when I was about 8 to 10 years old, I opened up my first dog walking service. So I was homeschooled at the time. And so I found a need in a product, and I said, people go during lunch to go let their dogs out and they waste their lunch hour. So I could go to my local neighborhood and offer that I could stop by their house for $5 a day, let their dog out, and then they don't have to worry about letting their dog out during the lunch. And it got to the point where, I had probably like 10 to 20 houses that I would go to for like $5 a day, which was pretty awesome. And then for like my age, it was pretty good money. So I got to the point where like I was like riding my bike across town, and it kind of got pretty crazy, but it was great. So that's where I kind of got my first like little entrepreneur spirit. And so I learned very quickly at a young age. Me and my wife had just gotten married. We had bought our first house. We were 20 years old at the time. We were 19 when we got married, and we had just turned 20 in December. And we had our first house. We had a salary job. I was about 4 months away from graduating. And I learned the point that you can never rely on someone else for a job when I got let go the first week in January, and got kind of our world shaken up when I realized that we didn't have a lot of savings, and we had some mortgages. We had our mortgage due, and we had no money coming in. So we learned very quickly that we shouldn't rely on other people to provide a salary for us. And so that's kind of what sparked the journey. And that was about almost 5 years ago from now when that happened. And so that kind of sparked the entrepreneur drive and started a business. And then I spent about 2 years working with a large quick service restaurant chain in the United States on market research. And it got to the point where my side hustle turned into a full-time thing where I was making more money. And we got to the point where about 2 years ago, I looked at my wife and I said, hey, we're making more money than we are on my full-time job. At the time I was finishing my master's degree. I was working a full-time job and basically working almost another full-time job on the side with my business. And I was like, hey, I'm tired of working 100-hour weeks. Do you mind if we make this jump? And so finally made the jump, and lots of hurdles, and continue to be lots of hurdles, but lots of good things as well. So that's kind of the start to finish story of where we were and where we're at now, and kind of the decision behind what we decided to do.
Yeah, Caleb, I think it's really cool that you started out young with the whole dog walking thing. I think that's super cool. I'm just out of curiosity. And you hear that story quite often, right? That very successful entrepreneurs start out very young. Like they have that entrepreneurial drive at a young age. Out of curiosity, were your parents supportive of your efforts when you were
absolutely.
a kid?
Yeah, and that was the one thing that they really pushed for us, get a job and get out in the job market at least. And, they tried to push us to do internships or jobs or something that would be a little bit more relevant. They were big sports fans, but they weren't, they knew that sport scholarships can only pay through college, and most of the time you're not going to make it past college. And so on the sports side, they're like, hey, enjoy sports, but don't worry about trying to make it into a professional career unless you love it. And so they were very supportive on kind of pushing us in the right direction of, look at the job market, research. And so they had done some real estate investing at the time. And so when I was like 17, I was 16, 17, I was kind of interested in getting my real estate license, which I ended up doing, and kind of, researched that. And I wanted to get my real estate license at 16, 17, but you can't get it here until 18. So I read a lot of books and watched a lot of YouTube videos and thought I could buy a bunch of properties when I was super young and realized you had to actually have cash for that. So, we had to readjust some expectations on my end, but they were really supportive on that front.
That's funny. That's not something you hear every day, that you wanted to get your real estate license, but you were too young.
I know.
So Caleb, you mentioned that you were a few months away from graduating. Were you studying something related to advertising?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was getting my degree in marketing. So from the very beginning, I've always, when I went to college, I thought I kind of entertained the idea of law school. My sister-in-law was going to be a lawyer, and I'd always been intrigued by law. I'd interned with some attorneys in my local town. And then when I moved down to college and realized it really wasn't for me. And so I was always told, get a degree outside of like, pre-law or history if you're going to go to law school. And so I decided from the very young age, like I'm going to go do business or marketing. And if it leads into something like law school, that'd be great. So I ended up doing everything. My sister-in-law had recommended that I go study abroad. So I studied abroad in England for 3 months. I just turned 18, so I could legally drink in England. It was pretty awesome. Right before I went, my parents were super nervous. So I went to England and then studied abroad some business topics and connected with some people, and then came back and finished my degree. So both my bachelor's degree and my master's degree are with a concentration in or around marketing.
Yeah, it's funny, not to, get off topic, but I feel like the legal profession is one of those professions that's really misrepresented in media. Like almost every time you see a lawyer on TV or in a movie, they're always some hotshot in some multi-million-dollar, like high-profile court case, right? Or like they're always driving the Ferraris, as they meet one client, on the beach, and then next thing you know, they're like meeting some celebrity. Like the legal profession is nothing like what you see on TV. So I don't know if that's something that you came across as well.
Absolutely. And what I got exposed to too, having both like family in the law side plus seeing lawyers, was it seems like there's two sides of either you go down the track and you're very successful on the legal side and you make a lot of money, but you work 80 to 100 hours a week and you have to continue billing, 40 hours of billable hours, or you take the route of maybe a smaller practice or you start your own practice. And the problem is, you get out of law school with, maybe $200,000 worth of debt, and you can maybe make $50,000 to $60,000 a year on a smaller firm. And so the reality of it is either you go to these big firms and you don't have a family life for 5 to 10 years until you make partner track. And even then you're not maybe going to do that, or 15 years, or you go small business and you're stuck paying loans off for another, 10 or so years. So I learned very quickly with wanting a family life that would not work out very well. And I think my wife would hate if I was in law school. So it's probably a good idea.
And Caleb, when you were studying marketing, did they also, as part of the curriculum, was there also a business side to it? Like, did they teach you things like how to run a business and how to balance the books and how to find clients?
There were, your traditional core classes like accounting and some law classes like, legal essentials of business and a couple other things. But our college did a little bit better of a job of preparing students for like more of a well-rounded business degree. But again, that I think there's so many caveats that, education can only teach you so much. And so it's great learning about assets and debts and credits and everything. But at the end of the day, until you're actually in the business, it's hard to know what you actually need to learn to apply. You don't learn about Section 179 deductions in college. But then whenever you buy your car for your business, you realize, okay, there's a thing. I could be shooting myself in the foot here, but I believe it's a Section 179 deduction. So there are so many different things that you can learn, but then there's so many different things you can learn outside of college as well.
And Caleb, you mentioned that first you started this marketing career path as a side gig, right? And then eventually it blossomed into a full-time gig. How did you land your first client?
Ooh, so that's a really good story. So it's actually kind of funny. So we, on the marketing consulting side, we had started this business. And so I had this vision in my mind I had interviewed at some local advertising agencies here in Oklahoma City. And what was interesting was they wanted people with bachelor's degrees, some experience, and they wanted maybe a master's degree at the same time. And you go in the interview, you're talking with them. And I remember walking into an interview and they tell, like, I meet with these guys and we're having a great conversation. They ask me how young like, inexplicitly, they don't actually ask me because that's illegal, but they ask me, hey, like they kind of hint to it. And so I mentioned how young I am, but how much experience I have. And I never got a call back. Like they would mention that I was like prime for the job. They were looking forward to it and then kind of got ghosted after that. And so as I started researching, I realized the job market in our local area for advertising agencies, you make really low money and it's not a fun job. I mean, you work a lot of hours and you're kind of slave to the agency owner. And so what I realized was there was no marketing consulting firms here. You have in the Bay Area, you have a lot of these big McKinseys, and not that we're anywhere. I'll preface it. I don't want to brag here, but we're not anywhere close to the scale of McKinsey or Bain or anything like that, unfortunately. But so we don't have any of those consulting companies. So I thought let's start one here with my experience at Sonic and these other big companies that I've seen these consultants. So I took this approach, all this being said, this long story, and I got my first client at $250 per month. And what I did was I put together a advertising strategy for them of how they could start. They had a construction company and a real estate company combined. How can we expand this and generate more leads? So I put together a plan for $250, and it was huge money for me at the time. I thought it was so cool. And that actually led to one of their partners having a flooring company that had kind of brought me in, and they wanted to generate some leads. So we just started some Facebook ads, and my Facebook ads were pretty terrible at the time. And but somehow, some way, they ended up spending, I think, like $500 to $1,000 a month, just starting out, because I would try to tell them, like, just spend anything. And they were getting probably, I think they closed over that year around $150,000 to $200,000 worth of business. And they spent like $6,000. And so they were pretty pumped. And so I started realizing the power. So my first client was a marketing strategy plan, and then it ended up being an advertising client. So obviously we moved on from there, but some interesting clients from the very beginning, for sure.
And it sounds like the clients were happy as well. They got a really good return on their investment.
They did. And I think that's something I learned very young, very quickly, was obviously you have to value yourself, but being so young, I tend to give a little bit more than I expect to receive. And so that helped with the relationship of not coming in and expecting to make a lot of money from them, but letting me prove to them what we were able to do, or what I was able to do, and kind of build that relationship at the same time. And probably could have made some more money, but at the same time, having those long-term relationships was huge to me, which led to obviously more business, because what happened was they would start referring me to other people, and we would start, that's kind of how we grew organically, was they would talk to someone and say, hey, so-and-so is doing this for us. We're loving it. He's doing this. It's pretty incredible. And before you know it, we have 5 to 10 clients from just people calling me about what they've heard,
Amazing.
Which was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so it sounds like you guys are growing by word of mouth organically.
Yeah, surprisingly, a marketing consulting firm, we're around 95 to 98% referral based. And our average client stays at least 2 to 3 years. And we've been around almost 5 years. So a lot of our clients have just come in the past 2 to 3 years as we've grown. And so we're kind of putting a heavy focus. Obviously, we're continuing to try to be better, but putting a heavy focus in treating our customers the best way possible and providing them with the best service possible, to where we can encourage referrals and encourage growth internally from them.
And Caleb, as you were growing, what did the decision to hire look like? I mean, maybe walk us through the decision. What went through your mind as you decided to hire your first employee?
It was really overwhelming. Have you hired an employee before? Like, no.
No.
Okay. So the anxiety of this is just incredible. So I'm sitting down, and we had gotten to the point, this was about 3 months after running full-time into my own business. I realized very quickly, I think we had about 20 clients at the time. And again, when I say 20 clients, like, we were doing well, but it's not like, it was all different scopes, and so different monthly rates. So money was good. We were financially fine, but it was one of those things where we weren't rolling in the dough at the same time. And so we had to make the decision to say, okay, I'm working 60 plus hours a week. We have a new, we still have a young baby. How do we continue to grow this and kind of build our team out? Because that's our goal. I don't want to be the sole proprietor. I'd like to have people that work with me. And so we kind of sat down in my mind and did a budget of, okay, what does a salary look like? What does benefits look like? What do we want to pay? And what I didn't realize was how much benefits and taxes add up to. And so I just did the numbers in my head on the spreadsheet of, okay, here's how much we're bringing in, here's how much we get it on the first of the month. And then over the course of 30 days, here's clients on net 30. And so I started doing the numbers and I'm like, okay, well, we can support a salary. And then very quickly, like I start getting ready to kind of hire and I look at taxes and I realize I'm paying a significant amount more than I expected, on a $40,000 to $50,000 salary. I'm looking at $60,000 to $70,000 all in. And that's with taxes and maybe some benefits. And so very quickly I learned to kind of budget a little bit better on that side of things and over calculate how much employees will cost just to make sure that if there are any additional fees that they can be taken care of. So it's definitely a very anxiety provoking decision because it's like, I'm taking someone's livelihood into my hands. I need to make sure that I have enough money to pay myself and my family because they come first. But then secondly, I need to make sure that I can pay someone else's family, or if they're obviously single, then just themselves. But it's a big decision. And so it took me a solid month to feel comfortable about it. But what I've been recently thinking about, we've got a couple more people on payroll now. So we're more than just one person. And what's interesting is when you get used to paying that first person, the anxiety never goes away when you hire someone, but it just gets normal. You're used to pulling away a set amount per paycheck for someone. And then before you know it, that's nothing. And the next person, and it gets a little tighter. And then you realize very quickly that, hey, we can get used to this. And so from my personal experience, that's kind of how it's been. And it's obviously been a little bit anxiety provoking, but it's been incredible the amount of time that they can take off your plate at the same time.
For sure. Yeah. So Caleb, maybe the pros and cons, right? So if somebody in their mid-20s if they're considering starting their own business and becoming an entrepreneur, plus maybe some of the top 3 pros and cons of being an entrepreneur versus being a W-2 employee.
Okay, so obviously we're in a really weird financial recession, economy, whatever you want to talk about when it comes to the current situation and the current financial outlook when it comes to businesses. So right now I've got a lot more, not cons, but a lot more lookouts. So I think we'll start with the cons and say, obviously there's no promises or stability, even if you have contracts with clients. So you never know if a client can always break contracts. And so especially with the current economy, the way it is, Q1 2023 was tough for a lot of our clients. And so there's a lot of anxiety of, will they continue to pay our invoices? Well, can they continue to pay for our services? And within marketing specifically, we're kind of the first line item to go typically. It's more of the fluff. People don't want to advertise in worse economies, even if they should. So con 1 is definitely the stability piece. Con number 2 is you work typically a lot more than you would with a W-2, but typically, depending on what your why is, you're doing it so that you can work less in the future. And so that's where, I had a really good mentor friend of mine come to me and say, that because every day you wake up sometimes and you say, why am I doing this? I want a W-2 job. I want someone paying me a paycheck and not having this anxiety. And so one of those things that he said to me was, you wake up every morning and you are going to continue to work because in 10 to 15 years, when your son's at a baseball game at 4:00 in the afternoon, you're going to have the ability to go see him and go watch the entire game and not stress about being at work or taking time off. And so that really resonated with me, especially on the family side of, we're building this business to make sure that, our kids can be taken care of and our family can be taken care of, but that we can live, hopefully, the ideal life that we want to live. So con 2 is definitely the time that it takes to get up and running and the stress that comes with it. And I think number 3 is the financial implications and the financial resources that can take to start a business. Depending on how you start your business, what cash flow looks like. One of the things that I learned very quickly was clients are terrible at paying sometimes, and especially when times are tight for them. So I remember several times that, I had probably 50% of my invoices that I was supposed to get in for the month still out after net 30. And that was very stressful because when half of your receivables are out past net 30, what do you do? And for me, I'm not a very direct person. So I'm calling people or texting them and saying, hey, just want to make sure you got my invoice. Like, make sure it didn't go to your spam folder. Like, are we good? Like, just making sure that you can pay your credit card. Like, it's very anxiety provoking. So those are my three cons that I'd probably start with. With the pros, it's absolutely incredible when you get to a point. The first pro would be it's absolutely incredible when you get to the point of being able to pull back from your business and be a little bit less, a little more unplugged. We went on a trip recently to go see family, and it was probably the first trip of my almost 5 years that I was able to basically unplug, and I maybe worked an hour or two in the evening. But for 3 days, I mean, I was able to walk away and my assistant handled all of my calls and any communications. And I didn't walk. I felt like every trip I would go on, I was stressed out about what email am I missing? There's always an emergency. And so pro one is when you get a little bit farther, it's amazing. Pro two is you can make a significant amount more of money, significantly amount. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one, but you can make more money than you can with a W-2 if you do things right. Especially from a younger age, you can set things up. And then I would say three, the tax implications and the ways that you can invest and save for retirement is just huge. There's a lot of programs for business owners that are in addition to a typical 401k or IRA or ways that you can continue to invest in your business and, in the long term, have a really good asset, hopefully, that you can either sell or continue to grow. And I hate saying the word passive income, but, somewhat of passive income for retirement, especially if you grow it the right way. So those would be probably the three pros. And probably the last one is my favorite of being able to grow something and know that the sweat equity that I'm putting into it, along with the work that I'm putting, is going towards something long term and towards my financial goals versus helping a company grow their goals.
Yeah, Caleb, very well said. Very well said. Wow, right on. It's funny you mentioned that about the net 30 and the collections. I grew up in a family where my father ran his own business. He ran a landscaping business for over 30 years. And that was the part he always struggled with, is how to collect money from people that owed him money. Because sometimes he, maybe people just forgot to send him a check. That was still back in the days when people would mail checks to you in the mail. This whole e-transfer thing didn't exist yet. And so, like you said, he had to call people, he had to visit their home. And at the same time, it's like, well, I don't want to be rude and aggressive because I want to retain the client. But at the same time, I want to let them know that, dude, you're supposed to pay me like a month ago when you owe me money. It's, he always struggled with it. I don't think he ever really figured out that magic touch.
That was one thing what really shifted for me was because I struggled for about 2 years. We just did net 30 invoicing for our terms. And where I was talking to a buddy one day and he said, why don't you take someone's credit card at the very beginning up front or at the beginning of the month and auto charge it? And that way, that you're getting your fee, because as you grow, people are going to trust you and they're going to want, you're going to be more desirable for them. So they're going to be willing. It's not going to be let me prove myself to you and then you can trust me. It's going to be hey, we want to work with you. And what's interesting was I had so much anxiety asking for people's credit card, saying, hey, you don't need to give me your credit card right now, but please go to that invoice, put your credit card in. It's going to save it, bill at the beginning of the month. Within our contracts, we say cancel by the end of the month and we won't bill you for that month. But I had so much anxiety thinking how many clients are going to leave. They're going to think all these bad things. They're going to try to think that I'm trying to take money from them. And what's amazing was all those negative thoughts that I had in my mind. When I talk to them, they're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I don't have to go in and pay the invoice every month. This saves me time, or this is incredible. And so it's kind of cool because the negative thoughts that I had were completely wrong from what was actually reality, which was kind of cool. So there are so many different ways for business owners now to have clients save credit cards and auto bill. And it's amazing what technology has done. So I always encourage people, don't ever be afraid for that, because it can put you in a pinch if you're not smart about it at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think people have to remember that businesses want to minimize friction, right? And so getting an invoice, individually going onto a website, typing numbers and blah, 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 even if it only takes 5 or 10 minutes, that's 5 or 10 minutes that somebody could be spending getting a coffee or whatever. And so if you just make it frictionless and painless, almost thoughtless, that's what people actually prefer. Yep, right. So absolutely. I think you're onto something. You're definitely onto something there, Caleb. All right. One more question, Caleb, before we move off the business side and more onto the actual marketing side, is if somebody's in their 20s and they want to start their business, what are some of the tips you have for them?
Ooh, okay. So let's talk through this. So on the cash side, I did not start with probably as much cash as I should have. We started the business with this again. This is when it was a side hustle. This is not, but I started with $500. So I built a quick little website. I threw $500 in a business checking account and started my business. And one of the things that I wish I had done, especially when we made the transition full time, was we kind of rushed things, and I didn't make as much of a, let's say, an emergency fund for the business. And so for the first couple of years, everything was always pretty tight. We had some cash reserves, but it wasn't anything crazy. And so I'd wish I'd maybe been a little bit more patient or been a little bit better at saving a little bit more reserves when it came to that, to where it's we've got 6 months of reserves. And so now 5 years from now, we're building that and continuing to grow that. But it would have been nicer if year one, we had that in place established. And so that's where, like, tip number one, I'd say, you don't have to stress yourself out and say, let's say 6 months, but make sure that you've got enough that when money does get a little bit tight, that you're a little bit more comfortable, that you don't have to stress out when your net 30 invoices are not being paid on time, especially if they get delayed to net 60, because you can, when employees get involved, you don't want to be the business that's always, hey, I hope this check cashes. I hope this goes through. Like, you don't want to be that business. So that's one of those. And then obviously, my big thing is, one thing I've learned is the client is never, they're always thinking about themselves, is one thing I've learned. And that's really helped me. And so when I get on a project, or, when it comes to workload for me, I've been pretty terrible over the past couple of years of putting work over my family. And what I've realized was I did that because I thought clients would be upset if we didn't hit enough deliverables on time, or if we just don't hit this one little thing, the client's going to be very upset. And what I learned was clients are very adaptive and open to change, especially when it comes to different situations. And so one of the things that I wished I learned a little bit better, and I'm still learning, is people are always concerned more about themselves than you. And so when it comes to missing just a tiny bit of a deliverable, or not going as above and beyond for a client, it makes a little bit of a difference. But when it comes to spending family time, there's nothing that can outweigh that. And so for me, I'm learning that shift of making sure that I can set better balance when it comes to work. You don't have to work until 6 o'clock every night to be successful. You don't have to wake up at 6 a.m. to be successful. So those are the different things that I think a lot of people get in their head of, if I don't do cold showers, if I don't wake up at 5 a.m., if I don't work 12 hours a day and am extremely proficient, if I don't journal, if I don't time block every 5 minutes, all those things help and contribute. But at the end of the day, they can also restrict you from being productive, because internally I've realized I've started being better at routines. And we were talking about supplements earlier. I've been trying to take supplements and, get to the gym. And I've held myself to a standard of trying to get to the gym once a week. And to some, it's like, man, that's a terrible goal. But to me, with 2 young kids and a business, it's really difficult for me to get to the gym. My son wakes up every time I leave the door. So I have to be very strategic on when I leave, because if he wakes up and wakes my wife up at 5 a.m., she's not gonna be very happy. So it's one of those things that we want to make sure that we adjust for family and adjust for time. So that's one of the things that I think is, a lot of people starting out in business feel like failures when they don't wake up at 5, or they don't take supplements, or they can't do cold showers, or they can't time block every 10 minutes. You have to make an adaptive system for you and what works best.
So Caleb, moving on to the business side of it, to the marketing side of it, tell me, what does a typical engagement look like? So when you reach out to a client, or a client reaches out to you and says, Caleb, we need some help, right? We got this new product, or we have a new website or new service. What is the typical engagement? What are the services that you typically offer?
So typically what we're doing is we are doing a lot of marketing strategy. So a lot of companies come to us and they either have been burned before and they're trying to kind of revitalize what they're doing. They might have had a company that said, hey, we can run Facebook ads for you, overpromise. They spent a lot of money with them and then got no results. So they're kind of licking their wounds and trying to figure out how they can kind of rebound from that. And then on the flip side, we're dealing with businesses that we've had a lot of businesses recently that have been established for 20, 30 years that have not done any marketing work. They've been around, they've been family owned, they've been referral based, word of mouth, but they don't really have any online presence. And so they're realizing the importance of it, how much money they're potentially losing out on. So what we do is we put together a full plan of how we can implement, modernize them for the past 20, 30 years. So we're doing a lot of different things, but it comes across as potentially website design and website management, comes through as search engine optimization, coming up on Google. A lot of clients are starting to advertise, especially in more B2C type roles. We're seeing a lot more advertising dollars being spent. And then there's a lot going on the back end of what we're advising our clients to do across customer journey mapping and segmentation. So a lot of companies don't even know what those are, but kind of mapping the journey from when a customer comes into your business, and it doesn't have to be online, it can be in person. What is the experience that they're having? And how do we continue to build that journey to where they want to come back and be repeat customers? In every step of that journey, documenting what that looks like. So someone comes to your restaurant, they have a good experience, you give them a coupon to come back. In the meantime, they're visiting other restaurants, they're talking to other people, they come back with that coupon. How many coupons do we continue to give them to bring back to make sure at touch point 4 or 5 that they come back for the rest of their life, because they enjoy the food so much. So we're spending a lot of time encouraging our customers to really dive into data and look at where customers coming from and how do we retain them, and then diving in a little bit further on the segmentation side. How do we build little subsets of loyal fans and appeal different strategies or different tactics to each personality to make sure that we can fit within each little puzzle piece of what they're looking for?
Yeah. And Caleb, you mentioned SEO, and from my own personal experience, I know that SEO can take quite some time, right? It takes time to, for example, land.
No, it happens day one. Day one, you're making 1 million impressions. That's how we do it. You obviously have been told lies.
But typically, I mean, when you land a client and you start working with a new client and you say, look, we're going to help you with SEO. We're going to promote your service on, I imagine, all kinds of different social media platforms, et cetera. How much time typically expires before a client comes back to you and says, wow, Caleb, thank you for your work. I'm seeing results now?
So we always prep our clients. We try to take the mentality of, if a client wants to work with us, we want to make sure that the investment is worth it to them. And so one of the things that we prep with is trying to set good expectations. So we say, especially when it comes to search engine optimization, because as you know, it can take a solid 3 to 6 months to start getting traction. You might start seeing some movement. It's kind of like the stock market. You might see the stock ticker going up a little bit and it's making a little bit of movement, but it's not like Wall Street bets where we can pump GameStop. Like if it pumps, it's going to dump. So the same thing with, GameStop, like SEO, you can have some really major movements and it can be positive, but if you see some really major spikes, you're going to see some major downcreases as well. So one of the things that we prep with our clients is, when you take on engagements like SEO, it's going to take a solid 3 to 6 months, if not 12 months. So when it comes to marketing, and not everyone can take this mindset, but we try to encourage our clients, take the mindset that this is going to take a year of your investment before you start seeing significant results, and make sure that you have it budgeted back or prepared to spend for the next 6 months. So that's kind of where we try to prep our clients of, think more long term. We're not trying to waste their money, but we're also trying to make sure that we set them up for the right expectations, so that in 3 months they don't feel like they've wasted money. They can see along every step, hey, we're making progress. We're making movement across ranks. So we try to keep them updated weekly or monthly or quarterly based on what their need is and what they're looking for of the traction that they're making. And we see that to be a really positive movement. So we typically say 6 to 12 months is a really healthy range if you can sustain that for your business.
And usually, Caleb, the way that your business is set up for those 6 to 12 months, for example, would you be on a monthly retainer where you have a fixed cost every month? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So typically with our arrangements, we try to make sure that in our mind, we try to estimate the amount of hours that our team would spend on that project. And then we basically average that out. So we know some months a client might come to us and say, like, we might spend 50 to 60 hours per client on one project, but then month 2 might be around 30 to 40 hours. So we try to average out the time. And what we do is we don't bill based on hours. We say, hey, we're going to include everything that this takes into our monthly fee. We're going to bill you a set monthly fee. We typically do weekly or bi-monthly or monthly meetings with clients, depending on what they're looking for, to make sure that we can set expectations and make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And then we basically provide monthly work based on that. So we've got a team of experts that work with them. So it works out really well for most of our clients because they like that dynamic.
And Caleb, do you find that you get more work from companies that offer products versus services?
Well, that's a tough one. I'd say we're about 50%. So we have some companies that are in like the technology space, the market research space, that we're trying to appeal to B2B. So we're trying to get more larger clients for them. We're trying to get, big corporations or B2B customers to purchase. We have probably 50% of our customer base being that. And we got 50% of our customer base being home service, lenders, real estate, those different types of things where it's a little bit more of an actual like product that they're selling. So we're seeing a really weird mix, but it's kind of fun because it keeps us on our toes, because at the core, marketing strategies are typically the same with some variation based on B2B versus B2C and the channels that they're on, but the strategies are the same. We're trying to resonate with what hits their target customer best.
And Caleb, do you find that most of your clients come locally or statewide or countrywide?
It's tough countrywide. We're kind of getting referrals. So we got a referral from a company in Pennsylvania, from one of our clients in Chicago. They recommended us to a company they work with in Pennsylvania. We've had companies in Denver that have referred us to local Denver companies, to California companies. So it's kind of all over the place, but it's kind of a little fun little journey. Yeah.
Well,
it's kind of a little fun thing.
That's amazing. So let's take a bit of a case study. So as I mentioned to you before we hit the record button on this call, is that me and two other business partners were starting a new company. We're going to be manufacturing a supplement. It's a doctor formulated supplement to help manage migraine headaches. I got to watch what I say because of FDA rules. But so in that particular case, so we have a product. It's not on the market yet. It's still a few months away. In that case, what type of services would you be able to offer us?
So I would recommend not even like just like our services that we can provide, but for you guys, I would really start kind of trying to generate a little bit of more of an awareness campaign of your company. So start building brand awareness of who you guys are from the very beginning. So how long do you guys have until, let's say, an estimated launch?
About 3 months.
Okay. So you're in like the prime window. So if you have the resources for the company, what I would start doing is you already have all your branding established and everything that you guys are going to kind of messaging wise and products and everything.
So we have a company name. We got the formulation. We're talking to the actual manufacturer, and it's a 3-month manufacturing lead time, essentially, by the time they have this thing already bottled and in boxes. But we don't have a product name yet. We have ideas, but we haven't decided on a product name. We haven't decided on a product slogan. We don't have the labels designed yet.
Okay, perfect. So what I would do is internally start deciding what that product name looks like, what that slogan looks like, maybe some more marketing side of that things. But then if you already have the company name and let's say you have your branding established already, start trying to generate some exposure both organically and through ads on, let's say, social channels around your company. So let's say you start a Facebook page. If you don't already have one on a business page, start doing some different campaigns where you can do some general awareness campaigns on Facebook around like a stock image and just kind of telling about what the company is, or maybe a headshot of you guys, a group shot of who we are as a company or your branding, just letting people know, here's who we are. Let's say your name is supplements.com. Supplements.com is trying to generate, we're trying to build a healthier lifestyle for, people around the San Diego area or the San Francisco area or around the United States. And so starting to try to generate some awareness and brand buzz on a very low level around your product and your company. Then when you start advertising, you have, let's say, an established page of 500 to 1,000 people on your page that have liked it, to where you're not like company zero. We're like, hey, we got this new supplement. It's Joe Rogan approved. We're cool, like Alpha Brain. It's one of those things that you already have an established audience, let's say, and you've done some testing on maybe some messaging that works, to where whenever you're ready for a product launch, you can push out a little bit more around actual messaging of products and product images. So that's one of the things that I recommend. And obviously, you're probably going to need a website. You're going to need to make sure that you optimize properly. I'd start building content from your perspective around how supplements help. And let's say the main ingredients in the supplements, start targeting content around those ingredients so that when people, let's say you have vitamin D in there, when people are searching for vitamin D, you're starting to generate information about vitamin D and drawing people in through blog posts for a conversion to your product page.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. That is actually really good advice. And for example, if we have that established and we reach out to you, what are the type of services that you would run? So you would actually create some of the posts, for example, on LinkedIn and Facebook. You would actually create some of the ads, et cetera. Is that
Yep.
mainly?
So if we were to, if we were to bid you out, we would say we would do social media campaigns. So we would do organic social media campaigns on kind of any channels that you think any of your target market would be. We would obviously recommend running ads, and we would manage those ads for you. We'd build the creatives, we'd build the copy, we'd build the conversions, all the conversion tracking. We'd optimize the campaigns in the middle of them and then provide reported results to you. And then on the other side, we do, if you guys don't have a website, we could either build you a new website, or we would, from the very beginning, we would help you manage your current website if you already have one up. We have copywriters on our team, so we could actually build custom blog posts. And we would build, in my opinion, what we would do is we would do some hyper-local landing pages for people searching for supplements in a specific area. Because if I'm looking for supplements in Oklahoma City, we could build a page around supplements in Oklahoma City with more information about our company, maybe the needs that Oklahoma City residents would have, then have our products below the scroll. So we can start generating some more information, then maybe some blog posts, to where we have, let's say, 500 pages built out, both of blog posts, of actual company pages, and then hyperlocal landing pages, to where Google starts seeing your website as a well-rounded, and let's say you have a lot of meat on your bones of the website, to where you're ranking a little bit better for organic searches.
Amazing. Caleb, which social media platforms do you find the most success in?
I think it's kind of like the question of like, what's the best time to post on LinkedIn, on social media, and what's the best post to post. In my opinion, I think it's where your target audience is, because let's say for supplements, I think Facebook and Instagram would be a really good platform for you, and maybe TikTok. But let's say for one of our market research companies that are targeting the Arby's of the world, the Wendy's of the world, the Chick-fil-A of the world, we might do some engagement on Facebook and Instagram, but it's going to be more for if someone Googles the company or puts in the company on any social channel. But a majority of their advertising is going to be, or social posting is going to be, on LinkedIn. So it really depends on if you're B2C versus B2B. LinkedIn's a great platform, B2B. TikTok can be a really good platform for both B2B and B2C, a little bit more for B2B, B2C. And then Facebook, Instagram, and all the other, like Twitter, is a little bit more focused around B2C companies, is what I would kind of traditionally generalize with.
Interesting. All right, Caleb. Yeah, thanks very much for your amazing insight and for your tips. Caleb, where can people reach you?
They can either find me on LinkedIn. Caleb Roche MBA is my title. Make sure you don't forget the MBA. That's very important. I paid a lot of money for that one, so don't forget that when you're searching. I've got a really great headshot of myself. So you should comment about how cool it is. So they can find me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn, sending messages, talking to them. I've started doing this thing with people. It's like virtual coffee chats. So with COVID, just sitting down with business owners, and because a lot of companies or businesses do it as a way to generate leads, but for me, it's a way to just connect with business owners. So I've met a lot of user generated content, influencers, UGC creators in the space. And I've done virtual coffees with them and just learned about what their experience has been on social media. And so I love doing those. So reach out on LinkedIn. And then obviously, if someone's a little bit more interested in maybe a warm conversation about what we could do, or looking for some more information, we provide free consultations that are no obligations. They don't have any obligation to work with us. We'll provide strategies, and they can go to our website, goclubcreative.com. And schedule that appointment online. So we try to make it as easy and as simple and as helpful for business owners as possible.
Sounds good, Caleb. We will put all those links in the show notes. And thanks again for your time this evening, Caleb. I really enjoyed the talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thanks very much.